I'm Ayush and I can speak like 8 to 9 languages.
Do you want to list a few of those
Yeah,
languages?
sure. So, I mean, English, Hindi, Gujarati, Marathi, and Kachia, these are just like my native ones because I just grew up around these. And then in like high school and university, I like picked up French, Spanish, Cantonese, and Mandarin. And like now that I'm in Hong Kong, I'm trying to like improve my Cantonese and Mandarin here.
That's a lot of languages. I sometimes post to people about speaking like four to five, but now you're making me like double think about whether I have boasting rights. um,
I think being just speaking more than one language is like an achievement in itself, I think.
hmm, yeah, interesting. I think to introduce you to listeners, this is Aayush Gala. He's an alumni of HKUST, which is the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, will be referred to as HKUST for this episode. He majored in both information systems and management. Today, I think I'll just be picking his brain a little bit for on behalf of listeners about like choices he made at university, lessons and reflections from university, and just any insights or advice or tips he has for making the university journey more smooth and more memorable and setting yourself up for whatever goals you have beyond university. So, welcome to the podcast. This is Uni Unveiled. I'm your host, Arya Tarun. I currently study at Minerva University. Welcome, Ayush. Excited to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, and it's nice to be here.
Awesome, and I'm also excited, and I think we'll get a bit deeper into this on the episode. You're like the first person from Hong Kong who I've got on the podcast, so I'm really trying to diversify by country. Most of my friends are US, UK, Canada, India, but it's lovely to have people from different countries because I think um, you can pursue your education anywhere, and so I think the first decision is sort of which country do I want to study in. I think that's the most macro decision. Most of us don't even know that a country like Hong Kong or Abu Dhabi also has great education, so I love to like also be spreading awareness about that through the podcast. So yeah, I think we'll be talking about HKUST, about life in Hong Kong, and a lot more topics on this episode. What we'll start off with is I want to bring listeners up to speed. You graduated more than 2 years ago at this point. So let's just bring listeners up to speed as to what are you currently working on. Sure.
So after I graduated, I stayed back in Hong Kong to work. I'm working in strategy and business development for like a global trading firm. So the firm is headquartered in the US, and then their Asian office is like in Hong Kong. So I like work out of the Hong Kong office. It's a pretty cool role. Like I work with like pretty smart people and like on problems and challenges that face like our company and like help grow our company's business. So I feel like I'm always on the cutting edge of things, and that's pretty exciting.
Hmm. No, sounds very cool. I think the first job is also a memorable one, especially after you graduate. Like the first paycheck, the first job, sets you up for like the future career as well. What I want to ask you from an academic point of view, as someone who's like in the working world right now, academically, how well do you think your HKUST courses in information systems, management, business, how well did they prepare you for the skills and concepts you'd need to know on your job?
So I think the job that I'm doing right now, it doesn't really like require any like hard, or at least that's the unique thing about my company. That at least for the job that I'm doing, it doesn't really require any like hard technical skills or like something specifically that university would teach you. There are like jobs out there where like university education is like a very fundamental thing you would need. But I think for my job, I think just the experience of going through university, meeting more people, doing like a bunch of like different interesting courses that like sort of keep you young. I think that's just like sort of what helped me excel in this job. And I think that is like part of university and part of like my IB education as well. So all of that put together. There are like small parts of my degree or like my major that help a little bit here and there. So I guess my job involves a little bit of like working with systems and working with people, and also like sometimes doing a little bit of coding. So I guess doing a business degree that had like my degree had some business and some of like tech in it, so that sort of helped a little bit. But I've also seen like people from like really different backgrounds in my role who like do equally or like if not better than me. We have like people who've done like a degree in criminology, and like someone who was once a civil engineer, and someone who was once like a high school math teacher, and like they all do like really well. So yeah, I guess I think it's quite dependent on like what your role is and which company you end up in, or
Hmm.
like, do you end up in a company or not.
Mm-hmm. Just as like a thought experiment, let's say straight out of high school, with whatever credentials you had, you landed the job. Do you think without like minus the few years you spent at HKUST, you think you still would have been able to do well in the job with just the high
I
school?
don't think I would have done as well. So I think like doing a job, and especially a job in like a global firm like mine, you need like some level of like maturity as well. And I think like university helps a lot with that. There's also like a lot of experiences that come as like a byproduct of university, which is like, especially as an international student, you like are forced like mature yourself like more as an adult, like force yourself to be a bit more independent. And I think that all like helps with my current role. So I think straight out of high school, maybe I would have, I'm not confident whether I would have been able to do this like role, but I think after university, like it makes a difference.
Hmm. Before we get into, you like hinted at the specific course you did and the technicalities of that. Before we jump into that, which we will, I want to like take a step back and talk about, as I said before, the first macro decision, which is which country do I want to study in. And so I just from knowing, you know, that there's a journey here. But how did you land up in Hong Kong, pursuing your undergrad?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. And like, that's something people are always curious about. And so So for me, Hong Kong wasn't really like my first choice, or wasn't even like one of my choices. Basically, like growing up in India in like an international high school, I always thought about like studying abroad in like the US, UK, Canada, Singapore, something like that. Hadn't really ever pictured myself coming to Hong Kong to study. I was fortunate enough to like have traveled to Hong Kong a couple of times because we had like family friends here. But I never really like pictured it as a place to like come for like higher education. So I like went about like in my like 12th year, like 12th grade, basically going about like applying to places. I applied to a whole bunch of universities in the US and UK, and then and Canada and Singapore. And then my high school counselor just like happened to ask me that, hey, Ayush, why are you not applying to Hong Kong? And I guess this was like during like the peak application season, so I was like pretty busy already. So I didn't give it much thought. I didn't like fully research. I just like looked at a couple of universities web pages and like thought, okay, like let me just like throw an application at HKUST. And yeah, I just like pretty much recycled an application from another university, like pretty much used the same statement. Everything else was pretty much the same. And I applied, and then only after I got an offer, I like sat and like compared it with like the best university that I got accepted from in the US. And I sat and like compared it with like HKUST, and like on a whole bunch of factors, it did like it fared better. I guess the most important ones now I feel are like HKUST, like it was just a couple of rankings behind that other university, but it was like 1/5 of the cost. So, I mean, I told myself, yes, the other university is better, but is it really 5 times better? I don't think so. Another thing is like Hong Kong is also closer to home. So I guess if I wanted to like pursue masters in the future and wanted to go further out, this would be like a nice stepping stone for that. And then also like I don't think this was a big factor back then, but I guess it can be for like other people. It's that if you want to stay back to work in Hong Kong, it's far, far, far easier than like the US, UK, any of these other countries. Because essentially like you don't need a company to sponsor you if you've graduated from Hong Kong. So yeah, I think those are all just like things I thought about.
No, it's very interesting, and I have other questions here. But what I want to start by asking is, now that you're working in Hong Kong, you graduated 2 years ago. Looking back at the decision, how do you feel? Like any regrets? You wish you had studied in US, UK, Canada? Would that have been a different experience potentially?
Yeah, I think so. It's like but natural to like look at other like options like or other paths that your life could have taken. And I think um I don't really have like any major regrets. I think overall I'm happy with like how my life has turned out, and I have like no way of knowing what it would have been for sure if I'd gone another path. But I guess there's also this like whole idea of the 4 years that I spent in university were like pretty harsh years for Hong Kong as a whole. So at the end of my first year, we had like like massive political turmoil. We had to be like sent back home because things got bad, and then we were like stuck back home because COVID started, and because of Hong Kong's proximity to Ground Zero, it was one of the first places to get affected. And things started shutting down, like one of the first places in the world. And then when I came back to Hong Kong, like Hong Kong's restrictions were one of the most like harshest ones in the world, and it was the one of the last places in the world to like remove restrictions. I think it had like pretty severe COVID restrictions all the way up till like end of 2023. And this is like well after like well into like my job as well. So this was like after I graduated from university. So I think in that sort of a scenario or like in those circumstances, I think people like me and around me, I think we just made the best of what we could with our like options available. And I guess it was nicer that like I could see a lot of my peers like my high school classmates who had gone to like places in the US or UK, and they were also sitting at home and like attending online classes, and I was in the same boat, but they were just paying like 4 or 5 times as much as I was like, okay, this seems pretty cool. I'm not complaining. It's just, and in COVID in Hong Kong, everything inside Hong Kong was pretty normal because they had like basically walled off the city from the world. But to get in was pretty hard. Like you had to do like a 21-day quarantine in a hotel, like 14 to 19 COVID tests, all of that. So it was pretty harsh for like people who had lives outside of Hong Kong. But I think once you were inside, like things were okay-ish.
Hmm. There's a whole like geopolitical tangent there, which I don't want to like go into in terms of Hong Kong and like what even currently like how good of a place it is to study, given the current situations. But sort of if you were to tackle this on a macro level, maybe some things you say here might also be relevant to someone who's like currently considering Hong Kong as a destination to study in. When there was like some sort of unrest and protests and the political issues, was it like on one end was it a hindrance to your learning, or on the other end was it like an interesting like learning opportunity of like seeing it firsthand?
Mhm. So I think the protests happened in like 2019, and I think that was like a pretty difficult time for Hong Kong. We as international students were fortunate enough that like we weren't involved in the protests. It was more like people who are like local to Hong Kong, people who speak the language, grew up here, things like that. And as a whole, like we felt pretty safe. Like even in the streets, like no one was like targeting us. It was more see like a local thing that was happening in Hong Kong. And I think one of the things was that at least compared to protests I've seen in India, this was far more planned and organized. Like they would like have like Instagram posts of like, hey, this is the date and time that we're going to protest in this location. So as long as you like avoided that, I think your life was like mostly fine. But yeah, it was just like I think it's convenient for me to say that it was like just an interesting aspect to my education. But like for a lot of people in Hong Kong, those times were tough.
Mm-hmm. Let's say more about being an international student in Hong Kong. And so you had lived pretty much most of your life in India. This was the first time properly, like you said you'd visited Hong Kong, but this was the first time probably living and settling there for many years. How was that experience from like a cultural point of view or from like a learning and growth point of view of like being an international student in Hong Kong?
So one thing that I really like about Hong Kong is that it's a very, very safe city. Like I guess on par with like I can't think of any, maybe like Singapore or like Dubai, something like that. Not even like it's far safer than like American cities as well. Um, it's a very, very safe city. It's such that like even if you're roaming around at 4 in the night, like nothing happens to you. So I guess in that sense, it can sometimes spoil you as well because like now I'm like pretty like not that self-aware than I when I go to other cities that oh I should not be using my phone right by the subway door or something. But I guess another thing is that it's a very fast-moving city, so that I feel like it reflects not just like in the overall vibe of the city when you're walking around, but also in sort of like the ethos of the people. So like people here like who are like from Hong Kong are like talk pretty short and like to the point, and like it can sometimes just be like borderline rude, but it's just like a very fast city, so like they don't have I guess my reasoning is that they don't have the time for like all these social niceties. But when I like travel to places like Australia or like Europe or like the US, I find that like people tend to be a lot warmer and nicer. But I think in Hong Kong it's just once you like get to know them, then they're like usually like nicer. But I guess if you just go to like a random cafe, like they will just be like, "Hey, what do you want?" They will not be like, "Hi, good morning, how's your day going?" None of that. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, another thing is like although English is an official language here and like all like signs and like things like road signs, announcements, everything else is everything, even government websites, all of that is in English. But like people's fluency like varies like greatly between like neighborhoods and settings, like I sort of compare it to like back home as well, where yes, English is like an official language in India, but like the level of fluency could be very different depending on where you are, who you're talking to, what sort of a setting is it? Is it like a restaurant? Is it just like in the middle of the road, something like that? So it takes some like adjustment to get like used to Hong Kong, but I feel like it has this like unique characteristic of like pushing you to like develop in like unexpected ways.
Hmm. Personally, and maybe this was, I know you had COVID in the middle and there was like a lot going on in your journey. But after a certain point, as an international student there, were you able to like call it second home, or were you able to feel very comfortable in the city, like you belong there?
Yeah, I think because of like the whole restrictions it had during COVID, like it became harder to like call it home. But I feel like now that things have gone back to normal, I like have my own apartment. Like I live in the city because HQST is like sort of out of the city. Like it's in a way like countryside, but like faces the ocean. It's in like a very rural area, or not rural, but like removed area from the city. But now I like live in the city. So I'm like more connected to the city as well. I have like a nice group of friends as well. I'm able to like have the like lifestyle that I want. Like during COVID, it was harder to like go in and out of Hong Kong, but now that's gone as well. So I guess now it's like a lot easier to call Hong Kong home, and like I think I like I'm like grateful of the time that I've like spent here.
Mhm. Also, because you're the first Hong Kong university student I've got on the podcast, I want to specifically be asking this question for any listeners who potentially like this is the first time they're even like seriously thinking about like I might even want to study in Hong Kong. And so, do you think there are even like specific cases where any international student might prefer Hong Kong over the US, UK, Canada, which is like the first thing that comes to mind?
Yeah, so I think there are like specific cases. I don't think like Hong Kong is like something I just recommend generally to like everybody. Even like my own like brother, he was initially considering like the US, and like I was actually pretty happy with that because I wouldn't recommend Hong Kong to him. But then his like situations changed, and I feel like in that sense Hong Kong made more sense, and now he like came here to study. But yeah, I think those situations are more like if you're looking for something that's pretty cost effective and like still good value for money, I think Hong Kong is pretty good for that. Again, depending on like the field as well, right? Like I'm talking about fields that I'm like more accustomed to, which is like business, finance, STEM, things like that. But I guess I don't know if someone really wants to really study like dentistry. I don't know if Hong Kong is a place for that. But I guess in these fields that like I know of, I think Hong Kong is a pretty cost-effective place. Again, if you're like from Asia and you want to like be close to home, Hong Kong is pretty good for that because it's like pretty connected of a city. But I guess on the flip side, if you really want to like not live in Asia, either you're from Asia and you want to leave, or like you're from another part of the world and you want to stay there, I guess Hong Kong is not that great of a place for you. Another thing is like if you want to build a career in finance, I think Hong Kong is pretty good for that. Um, I guess it's pretty easy to like, you know, I guess since finance is like one of the like bread and butters of Hong Kong, I think a lot of the like industry and like a lot of the companies in Hong Kong like just sort of revolve around that. So it's like pretty easy to like get exposure to that. There's also this like language component where like all finance fields might not be open to an international student because they need like language proficiency. Whereas if you like went to New York, like if you speak English, you can just like join any sort of field. But yeah, it's also like the experience of living in like a very fast paced and like um, safe city, which I guess if people are really concerned about that, that might be like a thing to consider. But I guess it's not like a place where I just like generally recommend that everyone should like apply to Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm. No, it's interesting. I consider myself, at least compared to peers, like I think I was decently well intentional about like even when I was going to the US, we just sort of like, as Indians, we just flocked, I think, and we just like it's just like why not go to the US? I think I was
Mhm.
really intentional about like why the US over other countries, but probably the countries I had on my radar were US, UK, Canada, India, maybe certain European countries. I didn't even consider like Asia and that whole side of the world. So I
Mhm.
think especially for someone who wants to have like this interesting, different university experience, who's looking for something like what you're saying, I think it's interesting to be like also considering countries outside of the top five or the top 10. As I
Yeah.
said, sometimes you don't even know like Hong Kong could have great education, Abu Dhabi could have great education, and we don't even like know. I had someone from NYU Abu Dhabi on the podcast.
Yeah, like Sakshi, I know. Yeah.
So she made great points for like why NYU Abu Dhabi versus NYU New York City. And there are like specific cases where it actually makes sense to go like NYU Abu Dhabi versus the New York City route.
Yeah.
So again, just really happy they were able to like dive into this as well specifically.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like as like at least a high schooler in India, it's like not the easiest to think about, life outside, like studying outside of these like 4 or 5 basic countries. But I guess like now, like we have a lot of these like access and opportunities so that like people should like consider and like as you said, make more of like an intentional or informed decision of like why they're choosing a certain place. Like I was like guilty of that myself. Like I just like closed my mind. I was like, okay, US, UK, Canada, Singapore. That's where it's at, right? And I like looked at one or two universities and like European countries, and that's it. So I'm like sort of grateful. Like my high school counselor would like point out Hong Kong, and then I feel like that's like a decent enough case study that like other people should also think that whether like their like university like choice is like the most intentional one.
Hmm. I think even for someone who's listening who maybe is ending up going to the US or the UK, I feel like study abroad is a great time to throw yourself into like a different part of the world. And so let's say in Europe, I would
Mhm.
like go outside of Europe, or let's say in the US, I would hit the eastern side of the world and have a semester or a year in a completely different like part of the world and a different culture. That's also like a very interesting experience. Sort of you see like I think the beauty of like being in, let's say in the case of Minerva, what I'm looking forward to in each of the cities is like you pick up some like values, beliefs, some aspects of the culture which your culture might lack, which are beneficial, and then that it's sort of if you put in the effort, it gets integrated into like your lifestyle and the way you like view the world. Having multiple of those is like that's an exponential benefit versus like two cultures. I think three cultures is like significantly higher and so on. It's not like linear in that way. Um,
Yeah, I feel
yeah, yeah. I think it's time we actually jump into your course specifically. So you studied both information systems and management. Curious to hear more. I think management. I'm hoping people have like a fairly good idea of what to expect in a management course. But being someone who was like business minded and is now in a business role, why did you even choose to pursue information systems?
yeah. So for me, like I was like right from like middle school or like high school, I was always interested in like tech and like the tech side of business, but I didn't want to like become like a full on like computer scientist or like computer engineer or something like that. So for me, like something like a university that offered something like information systems was like nice, which is basically like different universities call it different things. Like someone calls it like information systems, some people call it like management information systems. Like they all have like slightly different names for it, but essentially I think of it as like the tech side of business. So like a lot of my courses were about like designing systems and how those systems interact with humans. What are like the good and bad practices of like good design. So I guess it's like a hybrid of like computer science and business, but not exactly that. I like courses which are like on databases, cybersecurity, data science, business analytics, all of that. So it's all about like where like humans and tech interact, and I think that's like pretty interesting for me. And I guess like now my role at my work is also like somewhat similar to that.
But maybe it's like only 50 or 60% as technical as like a proper computer science degree, is what you're saying.
I guess it's not even as like 50. I guess it's even lesser for me. Like across 4 years, I had like maybe three like coding courses. Rest all were just like um I had like a lot of like university like basic requirements, and then like my major stuff was like how does like tech and people interact, or like things like data science or business analytics, and then that like involves coding a little bit. But then I had like only two or three like pure coding courses where they're like, okay, we're gonna like teach you Python for a semester.
Hmm. Now that you're in more of a business role, maybe you're not like, let's say, sitting and coding all day. You mentioned you were coding a little bit, but any sort of like mindsets or skills from those more technical courses that you see applying well to the work you're doing, even though it's more on the business side?
So I think I I think about this a little bit. I don't know how like active this is in like my head and like other people's heads, but I think like just learning like a coding language helps me like think logically and like think about like my approach to like a decision and like the consequences and like the actions I want to take in a more logical sense. I think this like affects me here and there, but I feel like it has more of an innate effect in like my thinking. And I guess like that is some like non-technical benefit of like learning a coding language. I don't think like this is something that every person should do. I think every person should just at least have a chance to like be exposed to some level of like coding, and then from there they can see like how much they're personally interested in that.
Mhm. I think sometimes, like, let's say, for example, like the main thing I'm studying is economics and psychology, but I definitely want to add philosophy to the mix. Not because I'm like gonna go and become a philosopher, but because I feel like some subjects you study because of the way it like trains your brain to like think in a certain way. And so maybe like some subject like a literature and art is like training my brain to think creatively, whereas coding is like how do I break down a problem, whereas philosophy is like never take anything at face value. I feel like each subject has like those mindsets
Yeah.
in like the concepts and the more like the jargon you learn definitely. I think like the way you think from a higher level, the way you approach problems, I feel like maybe even in your job, there are like you may not be coding, but maybe the coding mentality is like coming in. Maybe looking at like a business problem, breaking it down, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I see that. Like, that's why I feel like getting like an interdisciplinary education both in like high school and like university is like pretty important because it helps you like think about like a lot of different areas of or like different angles to a problem. And for me, like I've seen that like benefit me both like professionally and like outside as well. So I personally like, recommend everyone to like have like at least some level of like interdisciplinariness in their education.
Mhm. Yeah, also because like no subject exists in like a box. And so it's always like if there's business, there's like five other subjects that might be good complements to business. So whatever of that is of interest to you, I feel like sometimes we tend to make like I've seen people make the craziest interdisciplinary connections, like CS and philosophy. You'll find like something that connects them both. So I feel like especially in today's world, it's good to like know like three other skills beyond like that one main skill, just because they might come in handy sometime, even when you're working on that main thing. Uh,
Yeah.
I think now that we're mentioning Hong Kong as a potential place to go and study, I'm only well versed with like how US universities applications work. So whenever I have someone from a different country, I'll have to like begin by objectively just talking through the different components of the application. So for HKUST, what were the different steps or the parts of your application?
Yeah, so I think the fortunate thing, I guess, for me and for I guess even your listeners and you, is that Hong Kong, like HKUST's application wasn't very different from US universities' applications. Because in my head, I feel like there's like this whole holistic admission process, which is like what American universities have, and then there's like the opposite, which is like what the UK or like India have, which is like purely academic. And I feel HKUST was like closer to the American one, but like since it was a British colony and like it's Asia, they have like flavors of the other side as well. So they basically like on the application portal, you submit things like your basic stuff, like your high school grades, like what you've been achieving so far, and then like your prediction, your school's prediction of what you're expected to get at the end. Um, you're submitting like extracurriculars you've done, activities you've done, like different leadership experiences, community service, all of that. There's also like a personal statement, but I guess in the US they are like give you a question, but over here it's most just like, hey, just upload like a one-page personal statement, and they don't give much guidance, but it's quite similar to the UK. Like if you're familiar with the UK's UCAS system, where just talk about like why you want to study the thing that you're applying for, and then a little bit of like what other stuff you've done in high school. So yeah, like in HQSC, you're usually applying to a school. So you're applying to the School of Business or like School of Engineering or School of Science, or like sometimes they have interdisciplinary programs. So you're applying to those as well. So usually like you can leave it broad in the sense that why you want to study engineering, why you want to study business. So it doesn't have to like be very specific. Like, oh, I want to study like information systems and finance for XYZ reason. Um, there's also your school uploads, like as I said, the predicted results, and also like a recommendation letter. There's that, and then you also have to like submit proof of like English proficiency. But I guess the bar is like slightly lower than American or like UK universities, because they do realize like English might not be the native language for a lot of people in like Asia. So, and even like people coming from Hong Kong, they do learn English in school, but their like proficiency is not like native level. So they just need to see that you have like some proficiency, and then in university they have like classes to like improve your proficiency. And if you're coming in like very proficient, like as a native speaker like me, then those classes get waived for you. So yeah, you have to submit like evidence of that, which can be like either your IB results, IELTS, TOEFL, AP exams, all of that. And yeah, again, yeah, you can submit things like SAT, AP, all of that, but essentially you're applying in sort of like a track, which is whether like are you coming from an IB background, A levels, ICSE, I throwing it out there in Indonesian National Board, things like that, or if you've done like the Hong Kong local system, or they offer like the alternative, which is like you've done like SAT plus AP, so you like show that like throughout high school, like that's like the final exam that you had. um yeah, I think that's pretty much it. They also had like once you submit everything, they like have like an online video interview. They just like flash up, like it's an automated system that like flashes a bunch of questions and like gives you a couple of like minutes to like record an answer. I think this was like what was 6 years ago, so I'm not sure if that's still the case, but I think everything by and large is like roughly similar.
Okay. Couple of things I wanna sort of go deeper on. This is towards the first part of your answer. Do you think it would be fair to say, in like my interpretation is that like you need to have an X cutoff in terms of academics. Like they just won't look at your application if you're below a certain point. But once the academics are good, then it's about like the extracurriculars and the essays and blah blah blah, whatever else. But like academics is the first level.
So what I noticed from like my application, the whole application process, the offer that I got, and like from other people who like applied from my school and like other people who got in as well, it's there's a pretty large focus on your academics, like more than like I would say for American universities. So I guess it's not like I don't know if it's a hard cutoff because I think UK universities do have like a hard
Yeah.
cutoff. But I think this is more like a soft cutoff where like if you're on the border, they will like start looking at like other things. And then like if you're like well past the cutoff, then they'll just like make sure there's like nothing like extremely like controversial or like something like a red flag and like other stuff. But I think mostly it's about academics, and then I guess each program, like if you're applying to some of the more competitive programs, then they'll start looking at other things as well. So there are like one or two like more competitive programs which like have like a higher standard both in terms of academics and like other things like extracurriculars or like your personal statement, things like that. And over there, like they'll start looking at these other things, and then those programs also have like an interview, like a person like one-on-one interviews you. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. A decent amount of this episode, and I say this to a lot of alumni, might just be a memory test for you because I'm like taking you back in time. But personal statement off the top of my head, I did write my essays. But like even today, now that I've forgotten a lot of the content I've written, today if you were to ask me why are you studying XYZ, sort of very cliched answers come up in the sense of like I'm good at this or I enjoy doing this. I enjoyed this in middle school and I think this will be like something fun in the future. I don't know if you remember what you wrote for your personal statement, but like, what do you think is like actually good to write? Not in terms of like what the university wants to hear, but what do you think is like a compelling set of answers for like, why are you majoring in XYZ?
So I think for me, as I said, like I had pretty much recycled my like UK university application, which was I remember that being like it was mostly about why I want to study that major. Some like other extracurriculars I've done which like somewhat relate to that, or like either like can stand out by themselves. And then the last part was why I want to study at that specific university. So I like pretty much took that, like changed basically UK to HK, and like kept it for like hi, like this is what I want to study. Like I think some of it was cliche as well. Like I enjoy doing this. Like I have some experience doing this. I think like spending time at your university is going to like set me up for this. And then I also like mentioned about like why I want to study in Hong Kong, why that university. And I think that was about it. I don't know how much weightage like the admission staff gave to that, but I guess for them it might just be like a way to see like what does this person like, how does this person write, like how does this person like maybe present their ideas, um or I guess like is this person like really interested in like what they're applying for, is it just more like something they're throwing darts at. But yeah, I'm not really sure how much they like weigh specifically on that person's statement, but these are some of the things I think I wrote.
Mhm. In terms of the last section of the personal statement, which is why I want to study at XYZ institution specifically, do you think if I just like go through the official website, I have a basic idea of the program, I have a few basic ideas of like what is unique, that is good enough info to be including in the personal statement, or do you think I've like missed anything there?
I think I pretty much did that. Like I had no other information about HUST other than that like website. So yeah, I must have done something exactly like that 6 years ago. I don't know if like the like bar or like the like expectation has changed since then, but yeah, I think that's about it.
Hmm. Before we take a deeper dive into life at HKUST and sort of some different specific aspects, academics and beyond, how you are spending your time, I want to wrap up like this first section of before university and the application with asking you maybe again a more macro question, which is for a listener of this episode who's potentially considering HKUST, how would you describe like a student who you think would thrive or succeed in that ecosystem or in that university?
Yeah, so like the thing is, I won't lie, HKUST is a pretty academically challenging university. You're like I think it's like one of the top 10 in Asia. It used to be higher. I feel like the ranking has dropped a little bit, but at least at the time it was like number two in Asia. And you're like competing with like the smartest Asians out there and like people from around the world. So it's, and the thing is that the university is like sort of culture and like the culture of like the staff and like the professors, all of that does make it a bit academically challenging. So I've seen people who wanted their like university lives to be like smooth and chill and like party town, or maybe not that extreme as well, but they didn't want like put in that much effort. And I've seen those people like really struggle at HKUST. So I think the people who are like a good fit are like people who are able to like manage their time well, because I feel like there's a lot to do, and if you just like spend all of your time like in academics, you won't have like time to like do other things or like explore Hong Kong or like make friends. So I guess people who do well are like who can like manage their time well, and then have like a reasonable academic standing where like they have like a reasonable GPA, not the perfect, and they're happy with that. Like they don't want like a 4.0 or something, and then they can like devote the remaining time towards like other things. So I feel like in the beginning I also like fell into that rat race of like I need like the best GPA. And I think over time I realized like, hey, I'm like okay and comfortable with my GPA. And I guess different people have like different levels of or like different thresholds of like what's comfortable for them. And I saw like people who are like even like lower GPAs than me like were also like comfortable with theirs. So for me I was like fine with that level, and I was like okay, now I need to like give time to other things in my life as well.
Are you comfortable putting numbers out there? Because I'll tell you why. Because in my case, I know that I want to get into the world of work after graduating. And so my very clear cutoff is like somewhere between a 3.5 and a 3.6. After that, I genuinely don't care. Like all that time I save moving from a 3.6 to like a 4 is time I'm going to invest into things like clubs and networking and building cool projects. So I'm not interested in the perfect GPA. I want it to be like good enough because I want to save that time. If you're comfortable sharing, what was that like cutoff for you?
No, I guess there's like a couple of ways you can go as well. For example, like if you're really interested, like work for a finance company and like that really like typical finance career, they do have like sometimes companies will they will not mention this, but they do have like cutoffs internally. I've heard things like so HQSC is not 4.0, it's out of 4.3 because for them A pluses are 4.3 and not 4. Uh, I've heard like people like who've worked in like recruiting areas of these companies throw numbers like 3.5, 3.7. Again, they also like account for the fact that like different programs have different like difficulty levels, and different programs are like more challenging and some are not. So they also like adjust for that when they see applications. um but I guess on an HQC level, maybe that's something if you want to go in that specific field. Also, like if you want to go into postgrad, then and especially if you want to go into postgrad, like a research sort of a degree right after graduating, then like the only thing that they have to look at is like your last 4 years of university, and that's when like your grades become more important. Again, different like depending on that's completely dependent on which university you want to go to. And I guess if you're like not that like eyeing for like a like that harsh or like that intensive of a career and a recruiting process, like then I guess even like something like a 3.0 or like a 3.2 will also be fine.
Wow.
And I know like people who like are like doing their own businesses or like helping with their family business, something like that. They have like 2.5s or 2.7s, and they're also like doing fine. So I think it's all about like just seeing like, hey, this is as you said, this is like the level of or like the threshold where I'm comfortable at for what I want to do next, and after that, like I should give time to other things.
Mhm. My like major criticism of Minerva is that, and this is also a little lighthearted, is that you're taking us to all these countries and you're telling us about like cultural exploration, but you're also so academically intense that like most of the time we spend our days like in the room and just studying. So I think, and what you said is like true. I think even beyond HKUST and even beyond Hong Kong is that at university a huge struggle is like doing well academically plus doing well non-academically. Like it's easy to do well, it's not easy, but I think it's you can do well academically or you can do well sort of non-academically, but like excelling in both is sort of I think what the 4 years is like. It's that's the learning curve. Do you want to speak to, like, how was that learning curve for you? Like, did you start off spending a lot of time on academics and then that like you began being more balanced? How was that like process?
Yeah, so I feel like I agree with you. Like it, like if people in HQCs love saying like this, the staff or like professors and like people in management love saying that, oh, like we're not that intense of a university. Like Hong Kong is so beautiful, the university is so beautiful. Like the university is beautiful. Like that's I think the best quality about the university. Like it faces the sea. It's on a mountain. It faces the sea. So wherever you are in the university, like your classes or like your dorm, you're always like facing the sea, and it's like really beautiful. And it's in like really calm part of Hong Kong. So like there's not too much like noise, there's not too much of crowd. it's like not that easy for like random people in Hong Kong to show up at the university. It's an open university, like anyone can show up if they want, but it's like not that easy. So like the university is sort of like your own little like township or area. But yeah, like so people like in HKUST's like admissions team or whatever love saying that, oh, like Hong Kong's such a beautiful city, HKUST is so beautiful, and there's like so much to do, like both like extracurriculars wise and just like exploring and stuff. But they like make like the academics so like intense and stressful such that like even during COVID there was like a whole debate of like should we make this pass fail or not. And I saw universities around the world like making their like programs pass fail, but like HKUST didn't budge. But yeah, that's enough of my rant. um, but I feel like for me in the beginning, when I just started at HQST, I didn't know it was like I didn't know it was that intensive. But I remember on my first day, like on my very very first day, I like left this like intro to accounting class, and I was like walking back, or like it had been a couple of hours, and I was like meeting a friend in like the library, just like meet that person and then like head out for like lunch or something. And I saw this person, and this was an intro to accounting class that all first years like take. So I saw this person from my class. He had like the slides open, like the lecture slides and like the textbook open. And this was just the first day. So like all the professor had done was just like talk about what the course is going to be and like what the assessment is, things like that. And this person, I kid was sitting in the library like this, staring at the screen and like the textbook and everything. And that's when I sort of realized this is like an academically intensive university. And then so in my first semester or so, I was just like trying like because I had no bearing of like what I will do during the semester and what grade that like lead to. So I was just trying to like do my best. And that's why like I felt like I was a bit overstretched out as well. And like it was hard for me to like say no to things, to say no to like friends, to say no to like student societies as well. So I joined a whole bunch, like whatever I thought was interesting, I joined all of that. But I feel like all of that just like became a lot for me. And I feel like it's all like, at least for people like me, it's sort of like the natural progression that you go through. It's like, even if someone told me like back then, like someone who had been through this experience as me, told me that, hey, slow down a bit, like I don't think I would have really listened to them. But yeah, I think once like my final grades for that semester came out, I was like, okay, this seems fine now, but it's just one semester out of 8. So I just need to like continue on this. And like, I still wasn't like exactly sure like if this was completely fine. I was just like, this is something we can work with and let's try to improve on this. And then as I spent more and more semesters and like I sort of each semester I landed in like a slightly different like range. I was like, okay, this is fine, I can like work with this. And then I think it was more around like my third and fourth year where I really start to like understand that hey, like there's more to life than like academics. um yeah, I think it was like that natural progression that it took for me. I guess it would have been nicer to come to that more quickly, but again, like life happens, I think like and like it was we also had like my entire second year was like protests and COVID. So like it was all online. So like again we had like no bearing of like are like is grading going to work the same way as it did like in a regular semester. Is it going to be like how hard the exams are going to be? So we just had like, and we didn't have anything else to do. We were all just like at home. So the only option was to like give your best and see what happens. But then like after I came back to HKUST in my third year, all of that, I like started like enjoy the city more. Like earlier, I would like take all of my they were online classes. So I would just take all of them from like my dorm room. But I was like, okay, you know what? Let me like not be such a homebody. Like let me at least take them from the library or like a random like garden in my university. And then I like became even more experimental. I was like, okay, let me just like classes are online. Why do I need to be in HKUST? So I just like would take my laptop, like sit in like a random cafe in the city, or like I had some friends who lived in the city, so I'd just like go meet them, and then we would like attend a class together in like a part of their building or something. So I think that like exercise helped me quite a bit.
Mm. I mean, anyway, our classes are all online. I get that maybe listeners might be going to universities with physical classes, but I feel like when it's time to study, you've got like when you've got a whole day of studying ahead, I feel like it makes a lot of sense to go. It like first step is out of the room. If you're someone who enjoys being in the room, go out of the room, be on campus. If you've had enough of the campus, like if you've explored a lot, I feel like really go out into the city. As you said, go to like cafes or libraries in the city beyond your campus. I genuinely feel like, and maybe you can tell me whether my understanding is like correct or not, having graduated, I genuinely feel like the campus and the community becomes like an academic bubble. And so sort of you're living in this bubble and like you say you're living in Hong Kong, but you're actually living in HKUST, which is not an accurate representation of the city and the world outside. Once you like step out of the campus, you actually understand like daily life problems and challenges, and sort of you understand the local people, the local culture, whatever that word means, when you're actually like out in the city streets. So
So HKUST is sort of like a township of its own, where they have like a supermarket, they have a hair salon, they have like a doctor's clinic, they have like um even like a bar on campus, all of that. So it's like pretty hard to like justify leaving the campus. And also like the campus is like an hour away from the city, or like what is like the city center. So that like it's like a both like push and pull problem, where like you're pushed to stay in the campus and there's like very little like pulling you, because it's like hard to like get out. So which is why even on weekends when we would go out, we like you have to like sort of plan your day well in advance, because it takes an hour each way. So it's like 2 hours of your day gone, and like life is already like stressful enough. So you have to like think about what you're gonna do like that whole day. Um, so yeah, I think, but I guess like just going out like exploring the city did help a bit. And I know it's like because of like COVID, we were in this like weird situation where all the classes were online, but like now everything's back offline. So again, like it's not easy for everyone to do that throughout the week, but I think there's like some value to that. And like even around HQSC, there was not like nothing to do. And I realized that pretty late. I only realized that in my fourth year that there is like stuff to do that's outside of HQST that's not an hour away. And I guess like I feel like that sort of a situation can happen like with most universities. So like I do think it's nice to like really see what's outside of your campus.
yeah, absolutely. I think that what you said and sort of the last few questions and answers reinforced why I get like alumni on the podcast, which is even someone like me. So the podcast is mainly for high schoolers, but I feel like there's also value for like a freshman or a sophomore like me, because there are some things which like our seniors said that they realized in third or fourth year. And so maybe if I can realize that in like first or second year, that makes my journey also like more pleasant or more comprehensive. So I feel like I'll always love getting alumni because we can look at things retrospectively and be like, this I could have done better. This is where I would have spent my time. This is a regret. This is something I realized in fourth year. Start doing this in the first year. All of that. And sort of along similar lines, I'll bridge to the next section where we actually will fast forward in time, talk more about your HKUST day specifically, and I also might ask you like look at a few things in retrospect, which I'm hoping is also useful for like even a high schooler to learn, because they sort of entered university with the right mindset or not. The biggest thing is them not making the mistakes we made, I think, is sort of the number one aim here. So
Yeah.
what I want to spend a few minutes talking about now, and I'll just make a bridge here.
Yeah.
Would love to talk about how you spent those 3 university summers. I know like that's a big like question mark for many freshmen, especially when I was like getting towards my last few months of freshman year. I was like, it's a 4 month summer. Like I was going crazy. I was like, what am I going to be doing? Eventually, no matter what you end up doing, generally, even from what I've been asking friends, it turns out to be fun. You generally find a way to be productive. It turns out well decently in the end. But I feel like there definitely is no harm in sort of approaching a summer a few months prior and sort of planning what do I want to get out of XYZ summer. And so you had 3 summers, so the summer after year one, year two, and year three before you finally graduated. Walk us through how you spent each of those. Like how was each of those different and special in its own way?
Yeah, sure. So I think, as you said, like people are always like not sure what to do in their summer, and I feel like that's a pretty natural aspect, is like especially as an international student, because like you don't know whether you want to stay in the city, go back home, like all of that. So for me, my first summer, I was just like pretty eager to like spend time back home, like catch up with friends and family, and it was like a 3 month long summer. Um, like I think my university like ended around like the last week of May, and I was like expected back first week of September. So it was like more than 3 months long. And there's only so much catching up you can do, right? Like, yeah, like all of your friends are like back in town for summer, because like everyone like went to different places of the world and they all have like common summer. But after a while, there's only so much catching up to do. So I think after that, I spent a couple of weeks like doing like some small projects here and there. So like I spent some time with our family business, did some like small projects of like data analysis or like market research, just like keep things fresh so that I don't like, I'm like completely blank and numb for the summer. And then I returned to Hong Kong like 2 weeks early to like help with the mentorship program for like incoming freshmen. But also like more importantly, just like explore Hong Kong, because again, HQST just being so intensive during the semester, there's very little time for you to like, just in a way chill and relax. We like explore Hong Kong, and like those 2 weeks were like that basically. And
Hmm.
like, I did like every winter and summer, like there was not a COVID winter or summer basically, where I would just like go back to Hong Kong 2 weeks earlier and like just spend some time like exploring Hong Kong. The second summer I was like back home because of COVID. So I was actually back home because of protests, and then I couldn't go back for because of COVID. So again, like there weren't really like any internships because no one was really hiring, and it was only like the end of my second year. So I did just like a bunch of small projects here and there. Like I worked with like this professor and like some other students to like help revamp the professor's course. And there was like this program in my university that was helping like they had like brought in like a bunch of like kind of like I guess kind of like Minerva people who were like really like deep thinkers, people who thought a lot about like philosophy and like design thinking, things like that. And they like had basically like 7 or 8 professors choose some students that they want to work with, and then you like either like help revamp a course or like do some other like projects. And that was like a pretty interesting time because I was the only one online and everyone else was offline, but it was still like pretty fun to like work with all of these people, and I am still like in touch with all of them. Then like I spent a little bit of a couple of days like doing market research for like a virtual reality startup. I don't think that really went anywhere because like a couple of weeks ago I was looking for that company and they don't exist anymore. And I also did like 2 courses of like data science offered by my university, and like at the same time I like learned Python by myself as well because I knew it was coming my way in like a course, and I knew it was going to be an intense course from what I'd heard from seniors. So I was like, I have time, might as well just like catch up and like start ahead. And then the last summer, which was the summer after my third year, I interned with Deloitte, which is like a consulting, like audit consulting company, and that like digital consulting arm. So like we basically like advise clients on like digital transformation projects they wanted to do. Like one of my clients want to like completely change their website, so we like advise them of like how to go about it, like what are the things they need to do for that. And then that's something I like continued part time into the first semester of my fourth year. And then yeah, that's pretty much it.
Hmm. I think you busted like a huge myth. And this is like, I don't think it's a super logical myth, but even I had this fear before getting into summer is that if I don't have an internship, the whole summer is going to be wasted. There's no productive way to spend a summer without like that official 9 to 5 internship. I think you
Mm.
just busted that myth as to like some other productive ways you spend the summer. And so just recapping what you said, online courses, building personal projects, great ways to spend the summer productively beyond the internship. Anything else you'll add to the list?
I guess another thing is just like thinking about like what you want to do ahead, and like thinking about like what are some of the things you want to like get in place in your life, like whether it's like thinking about what courses you're going to do in the next year, or like the companies that you just want to like look out for, things like that. That's like something you can spend some time in. You can't spend a lot of time doing that. There's also like you can, for me, I would want to like work more on my health as well. So like I spent that summer just like I don't know, being more mindful of the health choices I was making and all of that. So I feel like not everything needs to be about your career as well, and you can like be like productive in the summer, like outside of your career as well. I do would say, at least from my experience in Hong Kong, the last summer before you graduate is like somewhat of an important one, especially if you want to land a job in like a big company where they like start thinking about their hiring a year in advance. So like you ideally want to intern with that company, but again, if you don't want to follow that track, you can just do like whatever you want.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, this is something I've heard even seniors tell me is that this summer, apart from whatever I'm doing, I'm going to be spending some time thinking about what do I want, like, what's my career going to look like. That always felt like pretty abstract for me. So, are you comfortable like taking that a level down? And so, let's say I have a week in my hand or 2 weeks in my hand. I want to be like thinking and getting clarity about what I want to do in the future. In terms of like concretely or specifics, what does that look like? Like, what do I have to do?
So I think that's a good question. I feel like that's a question that like a lot of people have, and I feel like there aren't any like perfect answers for this, but I'll just give you like my thoughts. And I think um, one thing to like think about is like when I went into university, I didn't really know what I want to do like going ahead. So I feel like if I'd spent some more time thinking about it or like exploring different areas or like careers or like roles, I could have like spent some time doing that. So I guess if people are like not sure of like what they want to do or like what things are out there, they can spend this time doing that. And to get a bit more specific, there's like you can start thinking about like what interests you in life, and not just like subjects or courses or majors, but also like what like activities or like what aspects of like just I don't know, going about your life interest you. For example, for me, I really like things that were like fast moving and like, where I was like coordinating like large things that are happening, whether it was like as simple as like, I don't know, family function or something, or like something in like a student society as well. But just like knowing that that's something that I enjoyed. um, it helped me like think about what sort of a role or career I want going ahead. Um, Another thing is I also think like people can spend some time if they've already decided on a career path. If there's some time, they can sit and think and decide of like whether that really is the right career path for them. What else like exists outside, and what are like their motivations for choosing that career? Because I think we see like so many students just like blindly follow like quote unquote hot careers, and I feel like some I'm just throwing names out there because these are the ones I've seen, but things like computer science or like finance or like consulting, these are just like those like hot careers that are like I don't know, and as a mix of like high pressure, fear of missing out, all of that. Like just the environment like forces you to like think about like these careers as very like discrete things that you should be doing. But I feel like a lot of people are like not the best fit for these, and there are like a lot of other like rewarding careers that are like good fit for them. And I feel like if you have this time on hand, you can like pause and like think about, hey, like just because my friends are doing computer science and like want a job in like Facebook, Amazon, whatever, does that mean the same thing for me, or like what do I enjoy? And then so that like if you like spend I don't know a couple of years or like a couple like some time in that career, you don't come to that realization later once you like realize you're not enjoying that.
Mm.
So I think some of the more specific things you can do is like first like think about what are your motivations for being in a career, like what drives you, what motivates you. And I guess it's like especially in the beginning time of your university, it's fine to like not have answers to these questions, but like you should be like cognizant that you don't have these answers. And then when you're approaching a new field or industry, you should be like all your activities in this industry, whether it's like learning through education or like through like online research, through networking, through interning, through like meeting people, all your like activities in that area are like focused towards finding these answers. And then once you found your answer, whether it's a yes or a no, you like update quickly and then move on to like the next phase.
So data collection, sort of, do I enjoy this? What do I enjoy about this? I feel like even if I take the example of the like quote unquote hot careers you mentioned, even within computer science, there's a whole world. I definitely don't know because
Exactly.
that's major, but like there's a whole world, and not all of it is like the typical two or three things you've heard of. Software, I'm just throwing words out, but like software engineering, data science. There are 100 different companies, all levels, all types, all sorts of industries. There's also interesting ways to like combine interests. I think it's also like when you have two like seemingly unrelated interests, maybe it's interesting to think about what are creative ways to like combine these. Like I like computer science, I also like literature, but I also like non-profit work, but I also like finance. Okay, now where's the intersection between like computer science and finance? How can I do work at that intersection? These are all like questions I'm throwing out, which I think I like even I'm still figuring out the answers to. But I think just having the question in the back of your mind is important, because then tomorrow when you go and do an internship, or tomorrow you go and meet someone for a coffee chat, you're able to like bring these questions to the front and ask yourself them, journal about them, whatever works best for you, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Awesome. I think what I'm specifically curious to ask you about here is, once you've landed that internship, like forget about the application. When you've got the internship, it's in your hands. You've got an exciting like 3 month internship ahead. During those 3 months, what do you think are ways to like optimize or maximize your experience to extract as much value from it, both from like a career growth point of view, but also in terms of like still deciding like what are your interests, what type of company do you want to work for, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so I think I'd suggest like a mix of like again, I don't think I'm like any person of authority to like say on this, but I feel like from my experience, I'd suggest some of the things that like I mentioned earlier, which is like continuously think about like what interests you, and like with every experience and every day passing in the internship, update that understanding. Because I feel like a lot of people like they come at that understanding once and that's like pretty static, and then they don't account for like new experience and like update based on that, or like change their way of thinking, or like look at alternatives. I think another thing you can do when you're in an internship is just like talk to people. I guess I don't think it might be a possibility for everyone, because I feel like if you're in a startup of like I don't know 5 people, like who you want to talk to. But I guess the larger the company, the more there's a possibility. But I guess there's also that tail end where if it's an extremely large company, you're not able to talk to anyone. But let's say you have the opportunity to like talk to people. I guess really try to understand like I guess one thing is go interdisciplinary, like talk to people across different teams, across different departments, across like different roles as well. So like I guess even if let's say you're like working in operations, like it's necessary to like for you to even like talk to like someone who's like in marketing, or like someone who's in HR for that matter. Just like get an understanding of like what their work looks like, what like excites them about their work, how that like sort of fits into like the bigger picture of your company. Because I feel like yes, you might like do really well in that internship and land that job right afterwards, but like if you really want to grow in that company or like outside of that company or like even build your own company, you sort of need to see how these like small aspects of a company like fit together on like the larger picture. So spend some time like talking to people. Sometimes it might be like hard to approach like like senior people and stuff, but see if there's like other interns in like other teams of your company. And I think interns will always just be like happy to talk to each other. And even if it comes to like full-time employees of the company, I feel like people are just like generally happy to like talk about themselves, like I guess case in point, and like you asked me like if you want to talk about yourself, and like it took me like some time like think about what topics I want to talk about. I feel like, but I still feel like people are just like happy to like talk about their life and their experiences. So yeah, like depending on like how formal of a company it is, you might have to like, I don't know, jump through some hoops to do that. But I feel like just meeting different people, learning about like what different things your company does is just like a useful experience, so that even if you like realize you do the internship, you realize I'm not interested in this specific bit, you might be interested in a different area of the company. It's pretty easy for like the company to see that, hey, this is a valuable person and this is what we think they'll be a better fit for, and like reallocate you to that.
That makes sense. And I think, and this is also my limited experience, but this is like my observation. Maybe we can talk through whether your experience aligns. I feel like even someone in a more senior position, and I think this applies to like mostly humans, and again, this is just sort of nature, human psychology is most people, like 90% of people enjoy just being really helpful. And so when you approach them tomorrow, you have 5 questions, they feel like they're in like sort of an upper level position. They're able to help you, support you, answer questions even if the whole conversation is just you interrogating them and them not receiving too much value from you. I feel like the best thing you can do is make them really understand how grateful you are and how helpful they're being to you. And so continuously like sort of summarizing what they're saying, taking down notes at the end of the conversation, ending with gratitude, being like, these are my 3 takeaways from this conversation. Makes them feel like their time is well spent in terms of literally just being helpful to you, because most people even at these big companies have had mentors who have helped them get to this role, and so it's sort of passing down the favor. This is also what I tell my juniors when they feel like they're annoying me with their questions about Minerva. I just tell them that I'm passing down the favor which my seniors gave to me. Like I annoyed my seniors, you're going to annoy me, your juniors are going to annoy you. That's sort of how this works. It's like a passing down of knowledge and wisdom. Do you feel like your experience aligns with what I'm saying?
Yes, I think about actually passing down a lot, because like I feel like when I was like younger and like confused or like at different stages in my life, I always like looked out to people for help, and I feel like I sort of think it's like my responsibility to pass that forward. But I guess as someone like now where people come to me with questions, whether it's because I've spent 2 years in my company, so even like juniors come to me with questions, or like whether it's something like this where people from like high school or university like approach me, I think there's like that element of like building rapport and like building that trust. Because I feel like if someone just like randomly out of nowhere who I don't know just like message me, hey, I have like these million questions, or like, hey, I just want to like connect with you, I think that's what I find a little bit like interesting slash sometimes annoying, which is someone would just like send me like a random connection request on LinkedIn with like no context whatsoever. And I'm like, hey, like I don't know you. I don't know what you want out of this. If you like tell me, I might be able to help and like I might be able to give some time. But like I guess building that like trust and like rapport and like building that connection instead of just like treating like each like potential mentor as just like a checkbox, or like, hey, I'd like send requests or like send messages to all of these people. I think especially like if you like spend some effort in like connecting with people, I think it'll be a lot more rewardable than like a lot of these like empty connections that you have.
Okay, let's go one level micro. Connect building rapport and building trust with like someone who potentially could be a senior or a mentor on a micro level in terms of specifics and details. What does that look like?
So the thing is, I'm sort of spoiled in the sense that like I'm not someone who loves networking, especially like small talk all that much. And I didn't have to do that much to like be in my current company. My current company is not, it's a financial company, but like it's not one of those like, oh, you have to like network with the seniors, and like you can just like easily message even someone who's like quote unquote the senior most person in the company and be like, hey, I have a question about this, and people are usually pretty happy. So I feel like I haven't really built those like networking skills, quote unquote, that like people in like university feel like they really need. And I feel like some people do really need that for their roles, and that's like perfectly valid. I think for me, what I found useful is just like being like genuine, being like trustful, being like open with people, and like making sure like you're a good listener. Because I feel like, for example, like I've seen sometimes people will just like, I don't know, pull up their laptop and like start taking notes while I'm talking, and like it's fine if you're still making eye contact, but if you're not making eye contact, like I don't know, like what I'm saying is like even resonating with you. So I feel like those like small, body language, like intricacies, maybe that.
Hmm.
But yeah, like I think I've just been like fortunate enough to like not have to like build those skills so much, and I really respect people who have those.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, very, very, very candid answer. I love such candid answers on the podcast. Sometimes our personal experiences might not align with like someone else's,
Mhm.
but you still managed to like squeeze in a few good tips here and there. While you said that, I was immediately like correcting my body language and sort of making the eye contact. So also like a very quick a call out to me. I landing the internship is the first step in the door. And so we've been talking about it as if the internship just appeared to you out of thin air. But I think like getting your foot in the door is sort of being the best possible applicant among many. Like internships are competitive, and getting your foot in that door. And so what we're going to do is like take a few steps back. I want to talk about landing the internship in the first place, especially as someone who's currently like somewhat involved in even like recruiting for your own company, and you're sort of like on the back end of that. What do you think what do you think like in terms of intern applicants, what do you think they could do better, or what do you think are the best ways to like have the highest possible chance of getting the internship?
So I think it like works different for like different companies, and like my company is sort of unique in the sense that they don't care for a lot about the, I guess, the background stuff or like the side effects or whatever you want to call it of like people applying. Like they don't care. Like I guess a lot of other financial companies that I've seen, they will like expect like people like hit people up for coffee chats and like hit people up for like networking and like join these like special networking events that they have. I guess we have like we do some of these events from here and then, but for us it's not like, hey, someone showed up to like this event, that means like they're like really interested and we should like put them through. And I feel like even for these like other companies, I feel like as someone who's like a recruiter, or like not a recruiter, but someone who's like an interviewer and like sees candidates like at roughly like I take 3 or 4 interviews a week. Uh, I think for me, or I think for like most interviewers, it's pretty easy to say when someone's not being genuine. And like sometimes it's also pretty easy to say if someone's cheating as well. Like if they've like heard that question before, or if they've like prepared some answers in advance. And I think when you're in university, like people tell you that, hey, like try to act in a certain way or like try to like do this in advance. And I guess if that's not something that comes very naturally to you, either you can like try to make it like a natural instinct for you or like try to force it in an interview. And I guess when you try to force it, it's like very obvious to like people that this is like someone like putting on a show for me. So I guess for me personally, I don't really like that when I see that in an interview, because I feel like that person's like not being like real with me, and like then we're like as a company, then we're concerned, what if this person like behaves like that in our company? I guess different companies think about this differently. Like some people want that quality because then they like may have to like go outside and face clients where they have to like put on a certain like image or a certain face. So I guess think a lot about like how you're coming across to your interviewer. Think a lot about like are you natural, are you like not being your natural self, or I guess is this like artificial self that you're portraying, is it something that you can consistently bring up naturally and if it like feels genuine? Because I feel like it is important for like some jobs, but like if it's something that's like not easy for you to like evoke it every time, it'll be like a struggle for you in that career as well. And I guess for at least for me, I want my career to like feel natural so that it doesn't feel like a stressful thing going in and day out. So like I want to do like things that come naturally to me.
Hmm. I think what you just said is also an interesting balance to be kept in mind when doing interviews for colleges. Like when you're at the last step of the college application and someone is interviewing you, I feel like I've heard this in some or the other form from most seniors. The very simple advice is don't go in like completely blank and clueless, but also don't go in too prepared. You want to be able to also be thinking on your feet and not having rehearsed everything 100 times so that it seems automatic. You want, even if you've rehearsed, like take 5 seconds. Don't just like let them ask the question and then like just jump into the answer. Like take 5 seconds, think about it, and don't stick with like the same game plan every time. I feel like being able to think on your feet
Yeah.
is a skill that comes across like very naturally, very quickly. That you've thrown someone a question that is like a curveball, and then they're able to like think through it and talk through that. I feel like that is an amazing skill, especially my consulting friends. That's like the biggest advice they give is sort of think on your feet. Don't go prepared to the interview. So then you can like think on the spot, talk through things.
Yeah, I definitely recommend that, and I feel like that's a skill that you can't like it. The skill itself is not something you can prepare for, but I feel like you can like do experiences in your life, like put yourself in unexpected situations or like learn like new things that are like coming your way, and that can like help prepare that skill. But I feel like sometimes people try to like manufacture that skill, and like okay, that's like I
Mm.
don't think that's like the best way to go about it. And I think like people who can like think on their feet and, as you said, take like 5 seconds to pause and really think about what they're saying, that's like a really important skill. Because some people like, let's say they like can think on their feet, but their instinctive response is like, oh, I need to like give the quickest response possible. Sometimes I think that the best response is like better than a quick response, like a well thought out answer is like always like, whether it's like an interview or like even outside, whether it's like your career or like even with friends or something, giving like a better thought out answer to something or like a better thought out like approach to something is like always like much more valuable than like the quick one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've hosted quite a few podcasts so far, and the moment someone tells me that like I'm gonna think about this, so the moment someone like looks to the side and takes 10 seconds, I also like prepare myself because I know like something that they're thinking on their feet, and most of the time, like 9 out of 10 times, a super like wise or a super valuable answer has come out of that versus someone like shooting straight off, which is like they've prepared or they've been asked that question before. But when I ask the question that really throws someone off guard, I think that also gets me the best responses because then they have to take 10 seconds to think. So I feel like taking 10 seconds to think is important. On the other hand, also making sure that the 10 seconds you're making the person wait is like worth it in the sense of like giving the best possible answer. I think one last thing I'll add here is sort of that this skill that we're talking about specifically of thinking on your feet can come from interesting places. And so it need not be mock interviews. In my case, it's literally this podcast, just sort of talking to different people day in and day out. I do have a script, so I come in prepared, but on the spot, I love asking these follow-ups. And so like that's where thinking on the feet comes from for me. For different people, that's like debate or MUN or like 100 different things. This is where like extracurriculars in high school, hobbies and passions, and also like at university, not just studying all the time, but doing things like clubs and networking. You'll never know like where you'll pick up these skills, which will then help you in like a more traditional professional setting. I
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I what we'll do is we'll fast forward a little bit more in time before we get to like the official wrapping up of our episode. I want to talk about how you actually landed up at this job and at this company. And so I don't know when that point was when you actually applied and when you actually ended up getting the position. But let's rewind a bit before that and like in terms of thought process, what was your thought process in terms of you're like a fourth year student? How were you thinking about the type of company you want to work for and the type of job you want to be doing?
So for me, like I in my fourth year, I like did try to put in some thought, but I guess that time the market wasn't really that great. So like I like planned some like decent things, which I was like, okay, this is like okay for a while. And then I heard about my current company from like someone who had interned then. I was like, let me just throw my shot. And usually they like hire out of their internships, but like some they just happen to have like a job posting available for like someone's joining straight to full time. So I just applied for that. I guess I got lucky in that, and the like acceptance rate is like pretty low. So in the sense that like I was like almost like confident that I was not going to make it. So I was just like throwing my shot in the dark. Let's see what happens. And the thing that like interested me the most about this like role and company is that the role is sort of like you experience like, because I wasn't like really sure what I wanted to do going in. I just knew that I wanted to be like in a role where I like work with tech, work with people, get like work on like some project based thing, not something that I'm like doing like a daily task every day, but like working on like project things which are like new and interesting every day. And this role was quite like that, where they like allow you to like experience different teams across the company, and then you like sort of work on a role that like puts all of your information together, and you work on like big things that like are like firm moving, for example. um, and that's why like my role in like strategy and like business development, all of that, it sort of helps me a lot, like from the time that like I spent earlier in the company, where like I tried out like lots of different teams and stuff. It gave me the opportunity to think about like what am I really interested in, what I really want to do like in this company and like outside as well. So I think that really like helped me. So yeah, I think going back to like my fourth year, I think it would have been nicer to like think about this a bit more deeply. That like, hey, I actually wanted a role that was like rotational in nature, that I wanted a role that like experiences lots of different teams. And then I get to like decide what I like chose. I did like think a little bit about it, which because I applied to some companies that had this sort of a nature, but I didn't like think that much about it. And also because like there weren't that many similar opportunities available. So I just sort of applied like what I felt was like a comfortable fit. Like some of the other companies I applied for like were in the cybersecurity space or like in the consulting space. And I knew like I liked that sort of like because I'd done a consulting internship. So like I guess taking a step back, like the internships I did were sort of like gauges for me to understand like whether I enjoy this sort of work, whether I don't enjoy that sort of work. So I did like an internship in like an auditing role in like a big four company, and I realized that's not something I want to do. I'm not going to be like an accountant. Not interested by that. Then I did like a consulting internship with Deloitte. And then I realized, yeah, this is something I'm interested in. Like I do see myself doing this, but I was a little bit concerned about the company culture. So then I started updated from that. I sort of took that experience and I was like, I want to find something similar but slightly better, and also like find a company with like better company culture. So then all the things I applied to going forward from there were like in that sort of realm where I was like somewhat confident that either from like people or like from like other people that worked there that the culture was like more like helpful, like more friendly, and the work was like somewhat in the realm of like what I was interested in, which was like consulting type projects.
In that sense, even internships which you don't enjoy, I think are also valuable because it's like I never want to be doing something like this in the
Exactly.
It's something that's out of the question for me. I'd rather spend 2 months there versus like 2 years in a company and then realize I want to like switch careers or switch industries. So even those
Yeah.
experiences are like valuable. Um, this is a very macro question. I'm sure there are so many nitty-gritties, but like on a very fundamental level, is the application for an internship and the application for a job, are they mostly similar or are they like very different processes?
I guess it depends very much like company to company. Like in my company, I guess it's mostly similar, but I think a lot of different firms think about it this way, which is the internship is just sort of like an extended interview where they like they're testing you out, and they're seeing like well what it's like to work with you and whether they want to work with you like in a more permanent capacity. I guess there are like internships which are just like for the sake of like experience, and then there are internships which are like a pathway to like a more permanent role at the company. So I guess for internships that are just like for the sake of that work, they're mostly like to fill like a temporary like shortage in resources, or like to give, usually like that's not the case, but sometimes companies are a bit more like charitable in the sense that hey, we want to like let someone in and like learn some experience, get some experience, and then they can leave. But usually like it's for like fulfilling some more like short term like crunch that they have. And then the more like pipeline type internships, which are like they're just like a pipeline to like their like permanent positions. And I guess there sometimes the bar for the internship, like the bar of like what you have to cross in an interview has to be a little bit lower, because the internship itself is like a bit like an interview. They put you in different situations, give you different projects, try to like see what it's like to work with you, and like see whether they want you like back for full time.
Again, I know this is so different company by company, job by job. But like again, on a high level, if someone wants to do well in internship and have the highest possible chance of getting that offer back, any like higher level do's and don'ts or anything you'd recommend?
So I think you're going to like again hate me for saying this again. I think it's very like company to company dependent, because different companies, like I've seen like especially from 3 internships I did, the expectations can be like wildly different, and a lot of times you don't know what's happening on the backside, right? Sometimes different companies have like quotas that they have to fill, or like they have like certain budget constraints, or like different headcount constraints. Um, so I guess with every company it's like a little different. That you can't like necessarily like apply like one strategy to like every single company. I guess the thing I encourage people to think about is that from your side, what can you do, right? The company is evaluating you for a full time role with them. I think you should be doing the same thing in the reverse as well. You should also like spend these 3 months evaluating whether you want to work with these people, right? And we, even in our company, we sort of encourage that in our interns, and we like sometimes we do find like there are some interns who like do see the work, and they're like, we don't see ourselves doing this full time. And as a company as well, I think the good companies are like grateful for that, because it's much better to have someone go through that exercise while they're in internship, compared like when they're like you're like as a permanent employee, they have responsibilities. There's some effort that's gone into like hiring them. So I like encourage people like think of this as a two-way process. It doesn't feel that two-way because like getting an internship is like more competitive like than what you would think for a company to hire people. But trust me, there is a struggle for like good talent and like the talent that is like a good fit. And we like I think we see that. I think many companies see that as well. So you can think of this as like a two-way interview.
I think that's a good distinction with like good talent and good talent that is also a good fit. Because if I genuinely feel like if someone is not enjoying what they're doing, they'll do the bare minimum and leave it. Like I feel like as a company, you want people who are like passionate about what they do in terms of going the extra mile. As a university, you want professors like that, and that applies broadly, I think. Um,
Yeah.
I love how you said like using that time to also be like evaluating the company while they're evaluating you as to like do I see myself here in the longer term? It's like maybe an appetizer for the main course is like maybe the metaphor I'd use there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. We'll fast forward a little bit more in time. So we're currently at the present day, just to give listeners of an idea of where you're heading in case someone is connecting or in case someone is just curious as to what's the future path. About 2 to 3 years down the line, do you have any sort of vision or idea as to what you see yourself doing career-wise?
So I guess in the long term, I don't really see myself in Hong Kong because I think Hong Kong is a great city. Don't get me wrong on that. Um, it's a great city to spend your youth, but it's not, at least for the lifestyle like I want for myself. It's not the best place to like settle down. Um, in the sense that like the houses are like one problem that Hong Kong does have is that real estate is really like tight, and which is why houses are really tiny. And so for me, that's like one of the factors why I don't see myself in Hong Kong in the long term. Another thing is like I'm pretty connected with like folks back in India and like people around as well. So for me, like I guess the natural thing would be to like leave Hong Kong at some point and then like probably move back to India at some point. I don't know if those will be like concurrent or whether I'll like move to some other place and then move back to India. Um, but I guess for me, like I sort of enjoy the sort of work I'm doing. It's like strategic work. It's like overseeing like large projects and being like the central point of like contact and like coordination. And it's sort of thinking about like where like we should head, whether as a team or as a firm. And I think that's the sort of work that like I hope is like valuable in like whatever geographic location, whatever industry. So I think I might like maybe probably change industries at some point or like um, be doing something similar even in the current industry. But I haven't like given that as much thought because I feel like the skills are like somewhat transferable.
Hmm. Okay. Um, if you would like put a finger on like 3 or 4 of those skills which you think are very transferable, even if you move countries, even if you move companies, a few skills you've learned on the job currently.
I think one thing is like, especially in the sort of role that I do, being able to like learn a complex idea, understand it, like imbibe it and like internalize it, and then give that to like another set of people who don't have that much understanding of what's going on. That's pretty important. Because like let's take an example. Let's say you're like the CEO or like some senior person in your own company, and you are like I don't know like looking to like expand in a new market, right? Let's say you're proud you want to like launch products in a new market, and that involves like lots of different like teams. Involve like your operations team, your like legal team, your like manufacturing, all of that teams, and then you need to like be able to like pick up and understand complex ideas from what those teams are telling you, and then imbibe it, internalize it, and then be able to like make decisions and like inform decisions to like other people and like give them the sort of context that they're looking for. I think that's a pretty important skill, and I think that's like pretty intertwined with communication. But I'll just mention communication separately as well, which is like making your like communication right for the audience that's like in front of you. Like what do you tell them, how much do you tell them, what do they need to know, how do you like ensure that they've gone away from that interaction with like the right understanding and the right like takeaways. That's like pretty important, I think. And I think that's like a skill that's like applicable in like almost like all careers, whether it's like something even as like as different from my career as like let's say being a doctor. I guess even for a doctor, like making sure like your patient has like understood right what you want them to understand is like pretty important. um yeah, I guess so. All of that, like a lot of that is just like people skills, I would say. Like the large like bucket is like people skills, because I think at least for me, like whatever career I see myself in, like I will be around people, right? So I think those skills will always be like transferable.
And I feel like there are people now we're talking about people skills. I feel like very, very few careers don't involve like being around people. Like there are, maybe I could list them like off the like on 10 fingers. Even someone who like might be completely back end, not with the customers. I feel like there's someone you're interacting with on a daily basis. And so people
Yeah.
skills feel like college is a great training ground. You're with people from all over the world, all types of people. I feel like it's a good training ground for sort of improving people skills, especially when you're getting into things more professionally as a career. Uh,
Yeah, I see that definitely. Yeah, I agree. Like spending time at university, especially like when you're an international student, you're in an environment that's different from your own, that like sort of forces you to develop these skills and like forces you to like talk to these like people outside. I guess one thing that happens that I've seen with like at least students from my background is that sometimes people tend to like be in silos. For example, even in HKUST, I saw that, like all the local students would hang out in their circle, all the people from like mainland China would hang out in their circle. Same for like India, Korea, other parts of the world as well. So I guess the people who can like reach across these like barriers and like make connections and like interactions outside of these are like people who like have like the opportunity to like develop these skills. And I think when you're at university, like that's one of the things you're like paying for, right? With your time and your money. So I
yeah.
think investing in that is like pretty nice.
I think that's well said. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. I think we touched on a lot of ground over this conversation. We began with like Hong Kong, why Hong Kong, the application. We've talked about university, we've talked about placements and career, which is maybe, I know there are high schoolers who start thinking about like after the 4 years, right, in from 11th, 12th grade. So maybe it's relevant to someone who's like looking super forward. But it was sort of interesting for me. I think I got a better understanding as to like areas where university prepares you well for the world of work and areas where like you have to work more on yourself and university might not prepare you as well, and also how you can make the most of university, like you just said about international students going beyond your silos. That's a good way to prepare for people skills, like when you're working in, like in your case, a more multicultural multinational organization. I think to wrap up, we'll get to the fast fire round of questions. So this is just a more exciting and fast paced note to end our conversation. I'll be throwing up a couple of quick questions at you, and sort of the challenge in your end is to keep the answers as brief as possible. So one sentence, two sentences maximum. Um, we'll start with Hong Kong again. The most interesting cultural experience or experiences you had over those 4 years in Hong Kong.
So I guess this is going to be a little bit long, but I think it's worth the wait. So in Hong Kong, they do like a lot of like during significant festivals like Chinese New Year, Christmas, all of that. They like decorate the whole city, and like when I say they, it's not like the government or something. It's just like lots of companies and like people. So that's like malls, offices, gardens, streets, all of that. So it's like pretty fun to like walk around and like see all these installations, and especially during Chinese New Year, they like usually incorporate the next year's like zodiac animal into that.
And these are sort of ornaments, or like what do the decorations look
It's like
like?
large installations. Like for example, like for Christmas, they'll have like a huge Christmas tree everywhere. They will like, I don't know, a lot of things will be like red, green, white themed. During Chinese New Year, they will have like random streets will have like, lanterns and like different like decorations. They'll also have like, I don't know, I haven't really understood why that's the case, but they have like orange or like mandarin trees everywhere. I think it's a sign of good luck or something. Also in Chinese New Year, like or like for Chinese people, like red is a very like fortunate color. So like a lot of things like red themed, and like this year is like the year of the dragons. Like the Chinese New Year at the beginning, a lot of the things were like dragon themed, and they had like a dragon parade on some days. So all of that like seems pretty like fun and interesting. There's also like Chinese, like Asian and like Chinese people will give out these like red packets, which is like they families or like coworkers will give these out, which has like a little bit of cash in them here and there. So if you like go to like different restaurants or like cafes or something with your bill, like when they like give you the check, they'll also like just give you a red like a packet of red packets, which is like with which has like the company's like theme or logo or something on it. And people love like collecting like different companies and like comparing like, oh, for example, Starbucks red packet was like so cool this year, but like let's say Dunkin' Donuts didn't have that great of a like packet this year, something like that.
Okay, very cool. That's interesting. Let's move to sort of the academic fast fire question, which is finance. So for any finance nerds listening to this episode, any book recommendations or course recommendations, or just anything that any way they can stay updated with like the world of finance.
Yeah, so I don't really have a book or course in mind, but like there's this new daily newsletter by Bloomberg called Money Stuff by Matt Levine. And a lot of people in like finance read this like across different like areas of finance as well. And I think the nice thing is like he really like he puts it in a very like fun and I guess kind of like a Gen Z type of way, which is like he will like poke fun at things, like point out like loopholes or like just like show that like things are messy in finance and everything's not perfect. And also like what he does really well is like he like leaves links at like different points in his article. So if you like are not sure about something he said, you can like click and like read up more about it as well. So I find it like a fun read.
Hmm. Any one wise quote that has stuck with you or inspired you over the years?
So I okay. Usually people like quote something by like famous people or like something they've read in a book. My quote is from like a TV show, Downton Abbey. And this person said like, the business of life is the acquisition of memories, and I feel like that stuck with me.
Hmm. I think that applies to university and beyond. Like I think
Yeah.
especially with university, I think that resonates a lot with like my first year and what I'm hoping for the next 3 years to be. So I think really like that quote. Um, the most you spoke we didn't have a chance to like dive deep on the podcast, but I'm sure you had general education requirements and elective classes beyond your
Mhm.
major. I feel like those have a lot of value, which like we not go into that in this episode, but like very briefly, one elective class that like was very valuable for you and very interesting. It taught you something unique about the world.
So I did this like humanities course on like identity and community, and it like touched on topics that like about conflict and resolution of conflicts and like how different like groups that are like polarized act with each other. And like I think the professor was like super cool. Like I still like follow him on like Twitter, and like I still see like the post that he puts out. And I think he has like a really interesting take on different things. And also like as part of that course, you're forced to like study like conflict and like identity politics and like your whatever about. So I like took India as an example and like made like a whole like paper on like how identity politics and like conflicts work in India. I think that was like a very interesting experience where I learned something and I was able to like apply it to like my like life background as well.
Okay, interesting. I know you mentioned New York City and Madrid as the two study abroad destinations. So if we had to leave those to the side, and if I gave you the chance to like spend a semester anywhere else in the world, do you have a preference for which city you'd
So
like
I
to?
think I would have said Madrid, but if I can't choose Madrid, I think I'd still choose somewhere in Europe because I really like how like there's no borders within Europe. You can like travel very, very like easily between cities. Um, but like definitely like one of the more Western European countries. And I like speak French and Spanish, so I like want to would like prefer to like be one of in a city in one of those countries so that it's like I can practice my like language a little bit. I think it's gotten rusty, so it'll be nice to practice that. And like just I really like the fact that you can like travel around the continent so easily.
Hmm. Okay. Lastly, if you had to wrap up this conversation with one final message for listeners, I'm assuming most people are younger than you, so high schoolers, maybe university freshmen, they're in
Hmm.
this, going to enter this interesting journey of university, then going to move into the world of work. Any last words you'd like to leave them with?
So I think of university as like like a free trial to like your full time subscription, like being an adult or like being like working or something. So I feel like in this free trial, like when you like think of like a trial that you do with like Netflix or like a music service or something, you are like trying out different things, trying out like different features and experiences and like content, right? I think you can sort of see university as like that as well, where you have these a couple of years, whether it's 3, 4, 5, whatever it is,
Mhm.
to like seek out different experiences that you weren't exposed to in high school, meet different kinds of people that you wouldn't have been normally exposed to, and like sort of through that learn the sort of life you want going forward and also learn the sort of people you want around you going forward. Because I feel like not everything's perfect in high school as well, right? You will always like do experiences and meet people that you don't think are pleasant. And then that is also like a learning experience for like you going forward of like, hey, this is are like the markers are like, the ways I can like sense for this sort of thing coming my way, and like this is how I can like avoid that. Another thing is just like please don't follow a trend because of the hype around it. And like especially when it comes to like choosing a career. I've like seen some pretty bad like outcomes over there. So like yeah.
Hmm. Like going beyond the, as you said, hot careers, something that's
Yeah.
rewarding, sort of following your passion. Yeah, and I think in terms of failure, I agree completely. Like I feel like failure is very important at university for two reasons. One, generally the downside is not as big versus like 10 years in the future. Like if you start a company or if you write a book in university and it fails, like okay, let's move on. And number two,
Yeah.
you like get accustomed to it also in a sense because like life is full of sort of the ups and downs and it's sort of this sine curve. but I feel like having a few like experiences at university, which are maybe less pleasant, which in the moment you're sort of like questioning why you went through it. If nothing else, I think it's a preparation for like life and adulting at large. In in a in in a time where you're like still somewhere between like a teenager and adult, like I feel like there are still some safety nets or some boundaries or some sort of guardrails in university. And those 4 years are a time where the guardrails are like sort of slowly slipping off and you're like starting to sort of like walk on your own, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like, I felt like in university, like, oh, I'm like already like adulting, like I'm like a fully grown adult now. And then once I like lived by myself, like started working, like have my own apartment, that's when I realized that, hey, like this is what real adulting is. And like that wasn't like not adulting, but it was just like preparing myself on the pathway to that.
Like somewhere in between. It's not high school,
Yeah,
like work.
yeah.
Perfect. Um, I think brilliant. We will begin wrapping up this conversation and bringing it to a close. If a listener wants to connect or has follow-up questions, wants to pick your brain about anything, what do you think would be a good way to reach out?
So yeah, you can find me like on LinkedIn as like my name Aayush Gala, and I'm sure like you can put that link in the description as well for people to find. Happy to chat if like your listeners have any questions.
Perfect. Thank you. Enjoyed the conversation. It was, as I said, it was lovely to get a new perspective, a new country on the podcast. Someone who's also in the world of work, able to look back on the university journey. I think I learned a lot of things which hopefully I'll implement in like my second year at uni. But pleasure to have you on the podcast, Ayush.
Yeah, thanks for having me and all the best for your university time.
All right, that was the episode. To all the young listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope you feel more energized, inspired, and curious for the exciting university journey that lies ahead. Stay tuned. Many more wonderful episodes to be released on Uni Unveiled across a diversity of majors, countries, institutions, and speaker profiles. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel Uni Unveiled. This podcast is just a small part of a much larger initiative undertaken by my family called Serene Strokes to spread positive sparks of growth, transformation, and joy among all our audience. Check out our official website www.serenestrokes.com. In the description and comments, please feel free to share other topics and questions which you would love to hear about from our different speakers on this podcast. Until then, take care and remember that this big word, university, may not be as scary or as intimidating as you think it is. Thank you for listening to Uni Unveiled.